Hi and welcome. If you are watching this, it's because you're interested in learning a little bit more about fascia and maybe taking the fascial stretch class and wanting to understand why we do some of the things we do. So my name is Jennifer Tubbs. I'm a physical therapist. I'm a fascial fitness master trainer as well as a Pilates instructor. So hopefully my background will feed into giving you the information that will make this more beneficial for you. I am going to go into screen sharing to have a little slideshow, and hopefully this will give you the information that you need. So I'm going to share and put this on play so you see that. Okay. So fascia, what is it and why is it important? Hopefully that's what we're going to find out here. Okay, fascia is basically all of your connective tissue. There are several different definitions. We're not going to go into the real specific stuff. This is going to be a very basic. It is long, continuous sheets of connective tissue that provide your body with structure and stability. Allows your tissues to slide and glide and shear with body movement. It transmits force of muscle contractions across other structures. It's loaded with sensory receptors, and it sits in a ground substance, which provides your cells with all the nutrients, and it allows removal of cellular byproducts. So you can even just kind of see in the picture there's that nice shimmery, silvery stuff. That is what your superficial fascia looks like. There's different components, and we'll go into a little bit of that, but depending on where it is in your body, the different components make it maybe looser or more dense. The more dense areas provide your body with a little more structure and stability. The looser obviously allows your skin maybe to slide on top of your muscles, or your muscle to slide on each other. So there's fascia that surrounds the muscle, and here's another muscle, and then there's fascia that connects them. And so there's certain looser ones that allow this slide and glide and shear, which allows for smooth movement. And there's also the fascia that kind of wraps around the muscle and keeps it stable. We will go into the sensory receptors and the other stuff a little bit more as we go along. Okay, so just talking about this, you have irregular, which is what we saw in that picture, fascia, and then you have regular, where it's more in parallel, they're more lined up. As you can see, where there's a lot of, I'm going to go to the far end there, a lot of regular tissue, and it's really dense. That's where you get your tendons, your ligaments, the things that hold your body together. And if it's super loose and superficial, that's the stuff that's on the top. It's irregular, allows for some flexibility and some net-like movements. And when we're stretching and training our fascia, we want to address all of these areas. So it's important because one area is connected to the other. So they're not independent of each other. The slidey, loosey stuff holds on to the dense stuff around the muscle, which connects to the tendon and the ligament. So it all impacts each other. I'm going to play this slideshow for you, and I'm just going to let you watch it. Okay, so hopefully that gives you kind of an inside look. That is found on YouTube. When it was first put out, it was like the only time we ever could actually see what fascia looked like live in our body. When you look at it in a cadaver, it's kind of flat, actually, just like this picture shows you, with it kind of stuck on top of the muscle. But in our bodies, it actually has some space in between, and there's all kinds of things going on within that space. So we're going to look a little bit about the fascial anatomy. And, we're kind of used to looking at the body as if it was just muscles, as you see in the, I wish my pointer would show here. It doesn't. So as you see in the middle picture there with just the muscles with the tendons, that's how everybody studied the body. We took off the fascia and just looked at it. But if you look in the far side of the thing, just the leg muscle, the top of the thigh, you can see that the fascia kind of overlaps and it connects the muscles to each other. And it also, we like to think of the front of our body being different than the back of our body, but it actually wraps around the whole thing. So what happens in the front of your thigh actually affects the back of your thigh, which affects the back of your calf, which affects the front of your calf. You kind of get the idea. So when we're training fascia, we want to incorporate the whole body. When you have an injury, it's probably not just affecting one little part. It's probably affecting that web, and we'll go into that a little bit more as we go along. Okay, so we had in the fascial anatomy, we won't go through all this, but you do have a continuity of the myofascia. Myo means muscle, so basically the fascia that wraps around the muscle then becomes the tendon, which attaches to the bone, which meshes with the joint capsule, which also helps to form the ligaments that keep the bones together. You get the idea. We talked a little bit about whether it's thick or thin, or loose, or dense, and how important it is that our muscles are able to slide and glide, so as we reach, it doesn't get stuck. It's not like something holding on and preventing you from going, but one is able to slide on top of the other and giving you space to reach and move about. And we talked a little bit about the relationship between the muscles, the tendons, and the joints. We won't talk about the rest of that today. Okay. So, critical aspect of fascia is that it is a body-wide tensional force transmission network. So when I showed you the picture of the thigh, you could see that the wrapping goes all the way around. We used to think that when we bent our arm, that just the biceps work. But when the biceps work, when you flex your arm, it also affects these structures around it. And the force is generated not just from that muscle, it might be what starts the movement, but the force is transmitted around to help your body to disperse some of that force and tolerate more. Okay, so think of the fascia like an orange. And on the outside of the orange is the skin, like we have our skin. And then on the inside, there's connecting tissue. That's that loose stuff. On the orange, it's not super loose, but on us, it is kind of loose and allows things to slide and glide. And then you have your orange slices. And each orange slice is in a packet. And that packet is like a muscle. So our muscles are kind of wrapped like that. And then within the muscle, in that orange slice, if you break it open, there's those little tiny pieces of juiciness that are each individual. And that's how our muscles are. Each one of those cells are individual, and then they're wrapped in little tiny bundles, and then the bundles will bundle together to make a muscle, and then you've got muscles bundled together to make a leg. So each one of those is connected. When you pull a piece of orange apart, you hear that that's kind of like breaking of those fascial connections. When you take the skin off a chicken, you kind of shear those connections. We have those throughout our entire bodies, and what happens at one level definitely affects all the way down to the other levels, even to our organs. The fascia holds our organs in place. It coats our organs. It has a part in everything: heart, lung, esophagus, your throat, everything. Okay, another aspect of fascia is that it has viscoelastic properties. So there is some energy that gets stored within the fascial tissues. They have found that there are some little contractile aspects to fascia, and most of the contraction happens in the muscle itself and not in the fascial tissues. But in those tendons at the end that attach your muscles to the bones, that's where a lot of what they call crimp or elasticity, where it's almost like when you stretch a rubber band, you store energy in it. And if you had a rubber band and you had it in your hand, and I wanted to get it across the room, if you tried to just throw it using muscle strength, it wouldn't go too far. But if you took it back and you pulled on it and you gave it tension and you let it go, it goes flying across the room. And so we have the capacity within our fascial system to use that elasticity. As we get older, we tend to do less things that stretch and train that elastic component. And so we use more energy to do everything that we want to do. So some of the things we'll do is we want to stretch the fascial tissues a little bit and then let them go and start training and retraining that aspect of our body so that we can function using less energy and be more efficient and actually have a little more flexibility. So they did studies and they found out that kangaroos and gazelles, which can jump a ton, have very similar kinetic storage to human in our Achilles tendons. So we do have the capacity. Obviously, some people have more capacity to jump than others, and especially as you get older, it's not safe to just go out and start jumping. But some of the things we do in the class, where we're pushing our foot down or we're doing a little bit of bouncing motion, it's to train this in a safe way to get you guys to start moving that area and start retraining some of that aspect of our bodies. It also has viscosity. Viscosity is kind of a thickness of a fluid, like honey is more viscous than water. And if you even think about it like a gummy worm, if you take it out of the freezer and you try to stretch it, it doesn't want to stretch real hard much. But if you put it out in the sun and let it kind of just sit there and get all gooey, and then when you go to stretch it, it starts to have a nice little play in it, and it's much more mobile and easier to use. So we do spend time with a warm-up, and really it is to get the warmth into our tissues, get that the fascial tissues being able to be flowing, so that when we go to stretch them, we go to move them, they're going to be much more compliant and much more mobile. So we talked a little bit about training a little more of the elasticity in it. And when the first thing you do when you get to a rubber band is you pull it back, which is what they call a preparatory counter movement. So you pull it back to put some tension. So sometimes you might see in class, we're reaching way back, we're putting a little tension before we start to make a movement. And then almost always, if you see even a baseball player or a pitcher, like they're reaching way back, they're stretching everything from their chest all the way back, even into their legs. And then when they start to come, they don't throw with their hand like this, they throw with their body first. Their body starts to come, and then you've got this late kind of coming through. So sometimes we'll be reaching back and we will initiate with our chest and then bring our arms through to start retraining some of that elastic components of our body. Long chains. The longer you stretch a rubber band, the more you give it, the more energy you're going to get. And also remember that the fascia is throughout our whole body. So we want to stretch it and move it throughout the whole, as much of the chain as we can, to get more mobility throughout it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about bouncing. Bouncing, as far as stretching goes, it comes and it goes. I've come to add it back into things, and the reason we do is I'm going to actually turn off the screen sharing for a minute and show you this. So let me stop that if I can find my mouse. It's not right there. It kind of hides in here, so I apologize. It doesn't show up until, let's go back. Okay, hold on. Not find my mouse. Oh, over there somewhere. Okay, finally found it. Okay. Yeah. I'm stopping the share. Let's go over here. Okay, we'll try to get back to that, but I wanted to have you see this. This is kind of important while we do stretching. So think about this cream part as being the muscle belly, which is, as you can think about, it's, even if you look at chicken, the muscle is actually softer than the attachments where the tendons and ligaments are. And when we do a stretch, we stretch, most of the movement is happening, as you can see, in the muscle belly, and a little bit easier part to stretch. Doesn't take very much, but stretch on that. But where most of the injuries occur is on the attachments. And so we stretch, 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 but our attachments aren't getting much. So there are times where we will take up the slack. We will stretch, and then we will do a little bounce at the end. So you can see at that little part at the end, you're getting a little bit more stretch. You've taken up the tension, then you start getting stretch in this part here. Whereas if we're just doing the whole thing, you're not getting very much stretch there. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is actually to contract the muscle. If you contract this muscle and make it short and then reach out, you're also, when we shorten this part, reach out, you're going to get stretch. So there's a couple different things we do with stretching where I'll have you maybe hold on to something and then get a stretch. Or I'll have you get to the end of that range and do a little bit of bouncing to try to get a little bit of tugs at the end of that range. Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen sharing and back this up just a little bit to here. Okay, and go back to this. Okay, so the other thing, changing vectors and adding variation. If you think about fascia, and I'm going to stand up here and back up, and you have this, here's my fascial sheath. I don't just want to stretch it this way, because I don't just move that way. I want to stretch it every single way I possibly can to get as much movement. So when I happen to reach behind myself to grab something out of the back seat or reach way up, I don't create an injury. So that's why we will change a lot of vectors and add long chains to get as much stretch as we can. All right, so this was a study that was done that just studied people who exercise, who did bouncing and that kind of thing, and people who sat around eating bonbons, or as they called it, a couch potato. And our bodies are constantly remodeling, whether it be fascia, whether it be muscle, whether it be skin. We're constantly renewing, removing dead stuff, bringing in good stuff. And a big component of fascia is collagen. And our body will continue to lay down collagen over itself. And if we're training it, we will train it to be a net-like motion. And if you think about a net, I'm just going to do it in here instead of trying to screen share again, you want it to be flexible. You want it to move. You want it to go in different directions, okay? But if you don't train it, you're going to get a rat's nest. Your body's just going to lay down fascia willy-nilly. And then when you go to try to move, think about like a necklace that's gotten all knotted up. You go to move, it doesn't move. It's restricted in many, many ways. And so movement is really important. Of course, as you're just starting to move, you want to move gently. You want to do gentle tugs on that tissue. It will realign, it will regenerate itself. Fascia takes much longer to change than muscle, so it's a little frustrating because it's not going to happen right away. 3 to 6 months to remodel. So as you start out, you may feel a little better, you may feel a little creaky, you may feel a little achy, you may be tugging on those adhesions, those areas where you're stuck. And it just takes a while to tug and change and your body to go, oh, I need to start moving here, and it will adapt and then provide you with that ability. Okay, so tensegrity is kind of a hard concept, but it basically is tension plus integrity, and it's basically how our bodies work with our fascial system. So the fascia is a body-wide tensional force transmission network, and the tension of the fascia responds to the stresses we placed upon it. I am going to once again attempt to screen share because, let's see, stop the share. Won't let me escape. I don't know why. It just changes the... Okay, so finally got that to happen. So I want you to see, this is the tensegrity model, okay? And it's basically how our body is. So these wooden things are like our bones, and the black is like our fascial system. And there's a little bit of tension on those bones. That's what holds our bodies together. If you think about it, our joints, it's very important that our joints have a little space in them. The space allows us to bend and move. If not, if they were jammed together, then you lack movement, you lack mobility. So it's important to have space for movement, but it's also important to have connection and tension. So you can see when there's a little tension on this, it does hold the space pretty well. And what happens with our bodies is, let's just say we have an injury and we collapse on one side. Well, you can see it doesn't just affect here where the collapsing is, it causes a stress or a tension over here. So a lot of times our injury is here, but what we're feeling is over here. And so with the fascial thing, when we start to, like I tell you to spread your fingers or take up as much space, I'm wanting you to do this. Take up space and then move in every direction possible to allow that mobility, to train this elasticity to keep the tension available in your bodies. Okay, so we will go back to our screen share, and let me see. I need to go back because it skipped a couple when I was trying to get it to share. Okay, so back to screen share. Share. And play. Okay, so, well, it did not go where I wanted it to do, unfortunately. So we'll pause that, see if I can get back to the stop sharing. Getting better at it at least. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. But this is the joy of Zoom. Okay. So we're back sharing, and this is where we were. Okay. So fascial stretch. We will activate long change and incorporate tensegrity. Pandiculation is something like when you yawn and you take up space and you move, and it just feels so good. If you watch a cat when it wakes up and it does those great undulating stretches, that is pandiculation. It resets our nervous system, it resets our fascial system. So we want to add pandiculation in there. We will load the stretches, as I said. We'll add many bounces. You can add weights. We won't be doing that in this class. Resistance can be found just even like in clawing the ground. Melting, it's important. They're finding that stretching can really improve your health and wellness. They did a lot of research with cancer patients, and it helped decrease some of the breast cancer. I want to say it helped the healing in that, improve the recovery from that. So melting and holding and allowing the tissues to kind of soften. And giving them time to change. Because again, fascia is not like a muscle, it's not quick. It can be quick to stabilize us, but it's not going to be quick to relax and slide and glide. And sometimes it will combine all of those. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about rolling, because rolling is very fascial, and there are a couple ways to do it and a couple reasons to do it. Oh, there's many ways to do it, but there's two that are really beneficial. And one is the fast rolling. And you'll notice in the beginning of class, we will do really, really fast rubbing our hands together, rolling our feet together. The reason we do that is that probably 6 or 7 times more receptors are in our fascial tissues. What are our receptors? I think we're going to go into that a little bit later, but they basically tell you your pain, where your body is in space, and how your body is. Basically, sense of well-being, or when you're hungry. You have something that tells you you're hungry. That's one of the receptors we have, and most of those are located in your fascia. But before we start moving, we kind of want to wake up our fascia and say, hey, it's time to move. Let's get going. You will notice track athletes and swimmers hitting on their legs, hitting their arms, swinging them, just to kind of help wake up those receptors. So that is a fast rolling. Slow rolling is to help rehydrate your tissues while moving the congestion. It improves slide and glide and shear, and it helps to release adhesions. So 2/3 of our fascia is made up of water. Think of it, so the fascia, I think you even saw in the video, there's a lot of hydration within the little tubules, but it also sits in a matrix. And in that matrix, that is where most of our cells get their nutrients, and it's also where they get rid of their waste. They work really hard. Cells actually have to produce and use energy to do their functions. And so they have to have this matrix for which everything goes through. And we want that to be healthy. But if you have an injury, or like you're just chronically sitting in a position that's stressful, that area gets congested and it gets, I just call it gunky. There's just a bunch of gunk in there. Think of like a stagnant pond. And you have this area that needs healing, and we've had this injury and tons of cells come in. Oh, we're going to rebuild, we're going to fix. But it gets too congested. It gets too stuck. Again, not moving also creates stagnation and getting stuckness. So you have this stagnant pond, you have all this good stuff that wants to come in and clean it out, but this area where it's all stagnant and gunky, it's thicker, it's more viscous, there's more stuff in it. So it's hard for the fresh water, the fresh healing properties to get into your tissues. So one of the main reasons we roll is to help move that gunky, stagnant stuff out. If you had a sponge and you put it in water, and it was soaking there, and you want to get the water out, if you just did a quick roll on top of it, you're not going to get a lot of water out. You're not going to get a lot of depth in the tissue. You're not going to get a lot of that stuff removed. So when we roll, we do spend time. This is one of the few times we really sit and just sit there, pushing on that sponge and slowly squishing the gush out of the tissues. We also don't just roll one part of the area. You don't just roll up the middle of your thigh. You roll to the side. We'll roll from one side to the other. The whole area, remember how connected it is. And we have muscles that surround everywhere. So we need to get this gush squished out of all areas. So we will take a different area every session, and we will focus on that. Okay. We need a certain amount of viscosity in our fascial tissues, so we don't want it super watery and slippery, because then you have no stability, but you also need to have adequate flow. So we work to try to establish that. Okay, I think we just talked about, it allows all of that. We do it slow. We do the entire surface playing with angles and shearing. And then it needs to be comfortably uncomfortable. You don't want to be gritting your teeth so much that you can't relax. The more relaxed, the deeper, the better. But it's going to be a little uncomfortable. And if you happen to find a place that's particularly uncomfortable, maybe you just kind of sit there a little bit and try to relax and try to give your tissues a chance to just ooze out of that area. It'll help bring healing to it. And it's almost like when you squish a sponge and then you open it and then it sucks water back in. That happens with your fascial tissues too. So that compression and then allows almost a vacuum to pull in healthy stuff. Okay, so here are the information about the receptors I was talking about. They are located in the fascial tissue. Proprioceptors provide information about movement. It's often derived from muscular, tendon, and articular, which is joints, joint movement. You have your pain receptors and you have your interoceptors that give you information about the internal state of your body. There's more, but these are the ones that we're really trying to address. Oftentimes, if you give your body more proprioceptive input, more movement, there's less focus, less attention, less ability to perceive the nociceptors, the pain receptors. So a lot of times movement will decrease pain because your body is now, not only is it decreasing the amount of input you're getting from the pain receptors, but also your body is learning that it's okay to move, that you're not gonna, it's not critical to your body, you're not gonna die, there's not a critical injury that's gonna happen if you start to move in a controlled and a safe environment. Okay. So remember that the fascia will respond to the loads placed upon it. So we want to put gentle, consistent loads on our fascia. So our fascia knows it needs to get stronger. If it's not strong enough, our body goes, oh, I need to be stronger there, so I'll build it. So we want to stress it, and we want to stress it in every direction so we have mobility and flexibility. If you only move in one way, if you only walk, you're only training your body in a straight way. It's why we move in so many different weird and strange and wondrous ways. We want our bodies to be able to go anywhere we want and do whatever we need it to do. Okay. The vast majority of injuries really occur in the fascial tissues. So while training, cardiovascular fitness and muscle are very important. And probably if you had to only pick one thing, those are the things you should train. But if we want to stay injury-free and have mobility and feel well overall, adding in the fascial component. Of course, when you train strength or cardiovascular, you are still training some of your fascial tissues. But we just put a little bit more focus on the fascia. You're still training some of the muscle stuff. It's just that we're changing the focus a little bit to have that be the area in this particular class is to train. Okay. So that is the end of that. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. Hopefully this was informative for you, and hope to see you in class.